I did not go with the intention of being an artist, though. I went with the intention of being a background vocalist.
Interesting.
I thought that that was my situation. I'm aware of my skill set, almost sort of like it's here. So I know that I do certain things. We're getting vulnerable now. But I do certain things because...
My guest today is a singer, musician, and songwriter who appears from the outside to be very busy working on multiple projects at once. And everything I've heard that they've been involved in has been sonically absolutely beautiful. And notably, they've been part of a backing vocal group called Espera, who have lended their voices to all kinds of projects across the rock music scene. As well as that, they are the lead singer and pianist, and I'm assuming songwriter as well, in the band Exploring Birdsong, which I've been doing a deep dive on recently and fascinated to learn more about. So I'm so stoked to have the chance today to chat to Lynsey Ward. Thank you very much for your time. To begin, I suppose, given you have clearly a multitude of talents within music, be it singing or musicianship, songwriting, and the rest. What was your first impetus that drove you when you were younger to go, you know what, I want to create and perform music? Was it from the vocal point of view? Was it instruments or something else?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. But yeah, so I started with vocals when I was 9 years old. So it's been going on for a while now. So yeah, I was at primary school, and Leona Lewis, for any UK X Factor fans. Yeah, she had just won. And I was like, oh, I like that. And so I copied her a lot, basically. So I would hear and listen to her, and I would just copy what she did. And then there was a talent show at school. Oh my gosh, the secondhand embarrassment now that I think about it is it's crazy. But yeah, there was a talent show at school, and I came home with the slip of paper that we'd been given, and I was like, "Oh, Mom, I want to do the talent show." And I could sense that she was kind of like, well, what are you going to do?
Do you have talents?
Yeah, right. She was supportive, and she was like, okay, so what are we going to do here? And I sang for her for the first time, I think, ever. And she liked that a lot. And so I did the talent show. And I'm very happy to say that I won the talent show.
Oh,
wow.
Well done.
It's my biggest career achievement so far. I'm still very proud.
There goes my later question. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, we've covered it. Yeah. So ever since then, it had been all through sort of my childhood of going through. My parents are exceptionally supportive people and musicians themselves, so they are very supportive, and took me along to various kind of like events up and down the country, so that I could get lots of experience. I ended up having a complicated relationship with those events in the end, because I started to explore other avenues of music. So when I was doing those things, I was very much like, it was pop music and R&B music. I'm a huge fan of pop music and R&B music, but at that time it's the classic, it's the teenage, like, I'm into rock music, I'm into metal, I love heavy music, I'm into prog. This was my thing. I was like, the prog is my vibe. And this kind of doesn't speak to what I want to do. Pretentious teenager, do you know what I mean? So those things kind of started to fall away. And as I was, just kind of exploring lots and lots of different music, I then started to think about pursuing it seriously. By the time that I finished school and it was time to go to college and etc. So yeah, it's been a long time now. I'm 27, so
Yo, listen, I got 10 years on you. You're doing fine. You got plenty of life, plenty of runway ahead of you.
Yeah, I'll ask my parents, because maybe, 9 up until now to listen to someone sing, that's too much. So maybe they can chime in on that.
Sure. A lot of it makes sense in that, for anyone that's not aware, Leona Lewis, it was a talent show winner. And so her voice is very much like a Celine Dion. Like, it is a pop R&B sort of powerhouse. It's a great, if you are going to copy anyone's voice to begin with, not a bad place to start.
It's not a bad shout.
Yeah. My version of that was I liked Green Day, so I started singing like Billy Joe Armstrong. Not the biggest pipes in the world. But then at what point, so once you started getting into the rock and metal side of things, is there anything that changed about your approach to singing in order to be more aligned with that kind of music? Or did you then go, well, I need to learn instruments as well? Or can I just be a singer? What changed at that point for you?
Okay, so both of my parents have a love for rock music, and particularly prog. And they bonded themselves over that. So while I was growing up, it was always around. So I feel like through my younger childhood, I'd kind of just accepted it as the music that my dad listens to. And when it's on in the car, like, it's a great time, but I probably wouldn't, like, that's what my dad likes. Yeah. And I don't know what I like yet. That was kind of the situation. But then when I was maybe like 11, 12, 13 years old, I was heavy into the Beatles. Like, that was, oh my gosh, I'm still there. I still the great band, but I was heavily involved, and I kind of took it all the way back. And then kind of, I went from them to who they influenced, everyone, literally everyone.
Good luck.
You know what I mean? But like, I worked all the way through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and just like tried my best to consume as much from the past, relatively recent past, it has to be said. I just tried to get my teeth into as much as what I could find. And that was the era of the quite pretentious teenager. Like, oh, you guys, I actually like good music, and you guys like trash. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just awful now that I think about it. I was definitely just insufferable to be around.
I think every teenager does that at some point, because you have to figure out yourself, and it is initially whatever is not your parents' taste is the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. But in terms of how it changed my approach, it really didn't change much at all, other than I think everyone, certainly vocalists of my generation and probably the one just before, we can all agree, if you're a female vocalist in rock music, you have Avril Lavigne and Hayley Williams to thank. So like, if you weren't like trying to sound like, if you weren't like catching on to the way that they were phrasing things, or like even their sounds, like actual mouth sounds, as strange as that sounds.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, you can hear it, and I love hearing it in other vocalists, because I'm like, yeah, man, we went to the same school, like we were in the same class. But no, I think that I realized through the advantage of starting relatively young, is that if you continue for the rest of your life, which is what I've been doing, really, you kind of get to grips with your strengths quite early on. And I realized that it wasn't really going to do me much good to try and steer too far away from that, because I do, like, Hayley Williams does Hayley Williams really well, and she's the best person at doing Hayley Williams. So I should try and, right? You would hope so. So I tried to kind of adopt the same attitude towards myself. That's a work in progress. But I try and tell myself that, what I can do and what I have to offer, that might be good enough.
Absolutely. It's beyond even music, but anything in life. That's what you learn over the time. It's like, actually, everyone else is already taken. So why don't I try and figure out what is it that I bring to the world that is unique, and lean into that, whatever that is. Yeah. There's a whole journey of acceptance that goes along with it.
And who doesn't, listen, if your nightmare situation is Leona Lewis singing over like some insane Lost Yes track, then I'm sorry.
It can't be for everyone, all
Right?
right? You
That
wouldn't
does
want to
sound
be
crazy.
At what point, because you play piano in Exploring Birdsong, at what point did you pick up an instrument, or was that just a tool to help you figure out notes when you're doing vocals?
Yeah, so my mom is a pianist, so we've had a piano in the house while I was growing up, but I never had any piano lessons. So I would sit down and listen to things and try and play by ear. To this day, I've never had piano lessons. So
Gosh.
it's a nightmare for Johnny, actually, because Johnny has.
Oh, it's this scale. The what? I don't know.
I don't know, man. Listen, I don't know. It's the blind leading the blind, except Johnny can see, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, he can't. I'm sorry, Johnny. But yeah, so in a similar way to learning guitar, I play a little bit of guitar, really nothing special. But I would look up the shapes that you have to make with your hands, and then I would read chords and things, and I would just do it that way. But the advantage that piano has over guitar is that the shapes are the same all the way up. Right. So it really, once you've got it, and you can just put it anywhere, and then you can experiment with where you're putting them, and it can get silly fast, because if you don't know what you're doing on an instrument, you can make the craziest music. It's insane.
But if you like prog, that's part of the charm of that, is like
Exactly.
doing something unique and different. That's actually kind of the challenge and the joy in it for those who like that kind of music.
Totally. And there are no doors. You can just go anywhere. There's nothing. So yeah, if you want to make wild music, I would suggest picking up an instrument that you have got no idea about at all.
Yeah, no, that's a good shout. Interestingly, and I'd love to find out more about this, because in terms of your career, that you at some point you went to Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts. When I was leaving high school, I was trying to figure out what the fuck am I going to do with my life. I knew I wanted to be in bands. And my parents were like, great, go get a degree. But they did find this place called LIPA. And they're like, well, if you can do like music technology over here and learn music theory. I pretentiously ruled it out because I didn't want someone to tell me how to write songs.
Yeah.
I didn't want to lose my edge, man.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, no, because they might teach me the right way to do it. It might be kind of conformist. I want to write like rock and punk, and I want to just learn off the internet, which back then was not really a thing. So like, how did you find going to LIPA? Did that allow you to lean into the strengths of like experiment, find out, or was it so theory led that it was difficult to battle against that in some way?
Okay, well, interestingly, so I was talking before about being a crazed Beatles fan, and I was at the time of decision time about university. So I had a friend at the time who I didn't know about LIPA at all. I had no idea. And he said like, oh, you know that like the school that they went to, that George and Paul went to, like, is a uni now? I was like, what? That is crazy. Why? But then I applied kind of on the off chance. It was a bit of a silly, like, oh, well, I probably won't go there, but like, it would be fun to try. And I was accepted, and I couldn't believe it. And yeah, I did not go with the intention of being an artist, though. I went with the intention of being a background vocalist.
Interesting.
I thought that was my situation, only because I had dipped a toe into songwriting at that point, but it really wasn't anything special, and however you choose to quantify that, that's an individual, whatever, but it definitely it wasn't good. So I really thought that, oh, this is good because I can learn how to adapt to lots and lots of different musical scenarios, and I can be in bands and I can be in whatever and not have to really think about the responsibility of being the artist. So I could play instruments by this time, but I just didn't really think at that point they were definitely a means to an end. Like if I needed to understand something better, I would refer to guitar or piano or whatever. But also that was mental because I don't have any formal training on either. So I don't know what I thought. I was like, oh, I'll just make this make sense. It wouldn't have made sense to anyone else.
I mean, a good reminder is at this age, you're like 17, 18. So like, you're not going to have the wisdom of the world necessarily.
No.
Like,
oh my gosh, and I did not. Wow. Definitely not. But yeah, so I then moved to Liverpool and met Matt in the first week that we were there. And no, that might not be true. It was very early on. And we kind of got together because he saw that I was wearing a Genesis t-shirt. And he was like, oh, I also like weird music. So, like, what are the chances? Because we were kind of both wondering if it was the right place for us to be at that point, which it was a bit previous, really, because we'd only been there 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, we really had no basis. But then we found each other and got along really well very quickly, had a lot in common, and it just so happened that in the practice room that we decided to meet properly at for the first time, there was a drum kit in there and a piano, and that's both of our respective instruments. So we created original music from that very first time.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And then, so in terms of the songwriting, that because there can be an assumption if you have a lead singer who also plays piano, with those two instruments, if you will, you want to call the voice an instrument, you can create songs just as. So it would be very easy to assume that you would be the main driving songwriter in Exploring Birdsong because you're coloring the lyrics as well as piano bits and pieces, and then you think, right, figure out some drums along with that. Mm-hmm. Is it more collaborative than that between yourself and him? And was it Johnny as well?
Johnny, yes. Yeah.
How collaborative is a songwriting process, or does it depend on the song?
Well, at first, because we were all kind of baby songwriters, I think there was, I don't want to speak too much for Matt and Johnny, but certainly on my part, there was a lot of like, oh, is this actually good? Like, I don't know. So there was a lot of leaning on each other. But because we are, and again, for better, for worse, we are very much on the same wavelength and on the same page about pretty much everything. So
Handy.
we would, that's useful and lucky. So if there was something that wasn't quite working, and this is still the situation now, if there's something that's like, no, we've always had the kind of relationship where we would just tell each other straight up, like, no, I don't think that's it, but it's there. Something's there and something will happen, but it's not that. And then someone will do something else, and then it will be, oh, it's that. Oh, and then we have a very yes and songwriting approach. So it's only in very, very recent times, while we've been writing the album, that all three of us have brought relatively finished products to the table to bring to Exploring Birdsong. But up until 2023-24, probably 2024 realistically, up until then it had been entirely collaborative. We would sit in a room together and figure out, maybe I had like a piano idea, or Johnny had a similar situation, or a bass riff. That's happened before, where he's just come in with a bass riff and we've been like, oh, that's sick, so we should use, and it's Matt, like I say, up until writing the album, it's largely been Matt that writes the lyrics. So
interesting.
Yeah. So it's a bit of an unconventional writing setup, I guess, in that, like, very often when we explain that Matt writes the lyrics, it is surprising to people, just because we don't really, you would assume that it's me, and
Yeah, you'd
it's
think that
not.
the person that is going to sing them might have a vested interest in
Yeah,
like what they're going
right.
to be about, but
Yeah, right. But because we all sort of operate from this one brain cell, it's sort of it's kind of handy because we can. I know how to interpret what he is saying and what he's trying to convey because I find it easy to interpret how he would phrase things and word things, and we usually end up at the same place.
that's handy as well.
Yeah.
What I think is great about that group in particular is one of the things I search for. If I am looking for very complex music, which I think Exploring Birdsong is you have three musicians who are clearly very good at what they do. Like I'm a big fan of the drumming. Holy shit, it's so expressive and fluid, but also there's fine details that a drummer would listen to and be like,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
And then equally the bass from Johnny, like it's very very busy at times, walking all over the fretboard, but you leave space for each other. It never sounds cluttered, which is difficult to do in those situations. How is that something you consciously do as you write? Like, oh, you got a great bass lick. Let me make sure that I can write something that gives it room, or is it more, I don't know, improvisational from there?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. It's a hard one to answer because when we do write together, it is intuitive. So it's, oh gosh, I don't know if I've ever really thought about it. We just kind of write what we think sounds right. And my approach, and I would assume so for Matt and Johnny also, but my approach is to songwriting is, oh, well, I'm trying to imagine that this is already a song, and what would I hear if this already existed? So,
Okay.
like, it sounds
No, I think
strange.
I understand. It'd
Yeah.
be like seeing an ice cube and be like, I see the ice sculpture inside it. How do I get to it?
How would I? Yeah, exactly. Like, what would I want to hear from, even if it's trying to kind of decide on a mood for the song, or like, what do I, is this like, that's usually the place to start. But then, even then, because we are in tune with one another about like, oh, what kind of song could this be, it usually comes together quite quickly.
Nice.
And it's a very rare occurrence for it to not be working within the kind of like first few goes of developing it. That's quite rare.
Nice. That sounds quite fortuitous as well, if it can come quickly, if you're in the same room and knocking off ideas quickly, because music is also a thing you can absolutely overthink and just perfect and add. But like, actually you can shape it like I'm weird. I don't know why I've got analogies like this. If you're shaping clay and you overwork it and it just dissolves.
Yeah.
Where the fuck was I going with that? I think it was more like, no, I completely lost the thought.
It'll come back.
It will come back probably in a minute or so. Yeah, you can overwork it and overthink it. And what I was going with is, you have piano, obviously, but you also can use keyboard. And with keyboard, you can have any sounds you like. Are you ever approaching that from the point of view of, there's a sound I can think about in my head, how do I find the right settings that bring it up? Or are you experimenting with settings and go like, oh, that sounds cool, how do we use that in a song? Because that could completely change the tone of a song depending on what those sounds are.
No, that's so true. And it's definitely both. So sometimes in terms of songs that are on the album, there is a mix of both. So that we will have come across something when you're like, you must have seen the memes where it's the guy in front of the computer and he's like, I'm looking for the perfect snare, and it's all through the snares. It's very that, but like, it's just something, it happens it's instantaneous. So if I hear something that I'm like, oh, it's mostly because it might be reminding me of something else, and I'm like, oh, I know, I like that, but then I can do it in the way that I can hear it forming in my head. I can make it real, like I'm realizing it. So but then other times, if there's something where this is 80s, like our thing sometimes is, oh, we want to make this like kind of vintage ish, then you have a great wealth of references that you can go
True.
to, and you can find the ingredients and then put them into your thing. And then because that's already familiar to people, they will also catch on to it and be like, oh, I understand this. I already, I'm familiar. So yeah, sometimes I think it's good to not worry about, like, it doesn't always have to be brand new. You don't always have to be reinventing the wheel. Like, it's fine to just make what you want to hear. That's what we do anyway.
100%. That's
Yeah.
glorious. In terms of your instrumentation, the piano has been quite a centerpiece. Certainly more, I think, in the earlier songs. And I've noticed as it's gone on, there's a little bit more electronics or a little more keyboards kind of coming in here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, I don't think I've heard any distorted guitar. I don't know if that's true or not. Either it's so subtle that it's like a layer of some notes here and there, or it's just not there at all. Is that a conscious choice that you want to keep the core sound influenced by that kind of thing? Or are you, I don't know, my question is, do you feel like you might be limiting your potential of sounds by sticking with largely keyboards? Or is that a consideration at all?
So there is no guitar whatsoever, just at all. But the beauty of working with Johnny on the kind of instrumentation and whatever is that he can also play guitar. So he's very aware of, like, oh well, if we did have a guitar part, what would that be doing? And how do I apply that to a synth or an additional keyboard part? So, like, there is because we are all so familiar with and fans of guitar music, it's all there, and we have the same point of references as basically everybody else who loves the music. So we are coming from the same places, and we are very familiar with what a guitar is doing in that space. So I don't personally think that there is any limitation without it, only because I think there are still keyboard sounds and synth sounds that haven't been explored yet. We haven't found them yet. And the library of, if you try and even guess as to how vast the library of sounds is for this one instrument, a keyboard, like, it's just unfathomable. I couldn't even begin to guess. So yeah, there's a lot to get through. There's a lot to get through before we kind of hit the wall. But I'm not concerned with that, really. I think that if there is something that we know that we're going for, we will be able to find it. And the advantage that we have is that while we are so familiar, we are, I don't think determined is the right word, because it's not that. It's just that we know that we can do what we do, and we have an understanding amongst each other about it. And it's not really necessary. I don't think it's not a missing ingredient, I don't think, from any of the songs. But I am too close to it, really, so I'm maybe perhaps not the right person to ask.
No, that's exactly who I want to ask. Someone who's close to it. So I'm so interested to see, like, what is it when you're on the inside? What are the considerations there? I think you're dead right. I think you're dead, because it's not like, there are moments in your songs where the whole spectrum of sound is filled, and it's like there's no room for guitar. So it's not like a guitar is the one instrument that would fill a gap in sound that is there. And you're right, with keyboards you can make any sound. And there's so many moments when I'm listening to music where I'm not even sure if this is a bass line on a bass guitar or this is low keys on a keyboard, because the lines can be very similar there.
Yeah.
I suppose I was just interested to see it, and I think I'm gathering that by not having guitar, you're staying closer to the core sound of what is Exploring Birdsong, and what is always hoped for, in my opinion, in music, is to sound unique. And I think the risk might be, if you add in some guitars, you're going to start sounding like some other bands and be like, this is just like whatever. And also, there's something about, if you want to be creative, sometimes you need to apply a rule. and then like, you can solve the problem creatively, and that becomes the fun bit. Like, what if we never have a guitar in this next song? How do we approach it? That actually it forces you to become creative about it.
Yeah, it's completely that. It's, well, we understand that it's a very, you're going to find guitars in rock music. I mean, we know. But yeah, you're right. It is a fun problem solving activity if we can, not because it's not a problem really. If it's not, if we can't find something that's doing the job, we'll just carry on until we do. And as I've said, not to sound too sort of hooray, this is so hippie and great, but like we do always agree and we always find it, and it's a feeling I think that we all get of like, oh, it's that, okay, cool, move on. And then it just builds and builds and builds. But I think it is important that and we always do, we always try to acknowledge that the core sound is piano, bass and drums. From when we were in practice rooms together at university and we were writing the first EP, that was how it was written. There was nothing else apart from strings.
Yes, I heard some violins at some point creeping into music towards the end of a couple of songs, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And I think I need to find the song name here. Did I hear a triangle? I heard something that sounded like a triangle. That would be wild if that...
Yeah, well, okay. Listen, you may have. By the time we got to EP2, what we were... Okay, so when we got to Dancing in the Face of Danger, it's always stuck with me, probably because it was after we released the first EP and we were getting a little bit of press off that. We were so excited that Prog Magazine wanted anything to do with us because we had all been like, oh my God, amazing, it's our dream. Cool. And they've always been so supportive and lovely with us. So when we first got the reviews for the first EP, I remember it saying, I wonder how they're going to progress. I want to hear this sound progress. And it's always stuck with me. And I think it always will now. I will always be thinking like, how do we keep it moving? How do, if you want to do piano, bass and drums, that is great. But then you're moving towards like, okay, well, is this jazz? Is this what do we, if we know that we have a direction that we want to move in and a sound that we want to achieve, I think we're pretty good at identifying which elements we need to include to make it happen. Yeah. So it felt very natural actually to just expand and explore the full spectrum of where we can go and bring it to its logical conclusion. And I think that's a very far distant point with our music. I think there's plenty to go at. So as long as Matt and Johnny don't get bored,
You're it. Yeah, I found my note here. I think it was the song "The Way Down." I was like, but the thing is, it could have been a triangle. It could equally have been a particular way you hit a bell on a symbol. I'm not really sure.
No, that's a triangle. So we're digging deep now.
Points for Steve.
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah, and in the example of kind of progressing the sound, I think as I was going through your catalog of music, I started from the back and I've gone more to the present. I think it was when I heard the Collapse. I was like, oh, this sounds like a whole another step into almost like synths and kind of like more keyboardy where it's like that. But it's very much an Exploring Birdsong song. But it has other layers that you can kind of play with. I thought it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and interestingly, I believe that the Collapse was the first record that we put out with Cam at the helm.
Interesting.
So I had wanted and spoke to Cameron quite a bit about like, oh, I'd love to hear what you would do with the elements that we have. We loved the sound of the second EP. We loved it. But some people just have a different kind of perspective and they can bring something that maybe you hadn't considered before, and it's really interesting to get different people's ideas and how they would interpret our sound. And I think when it felt right, I did have a feeling that it was going to be good, and I was very pleased with how it turned out and continue to be, because I do think that it's inching ever closer to, particularly with the singles that we put out last year. It's all building towards the album, and I feel that a lot of consideration and time has been spent and still is being spent on how to fully realize Exploring Birdsong in this context, in the context of these songs. And I really do think that that's going to happen. I'm very excited and pleased with what's already been happening there. So, but you're right. There was a definite kind of like, okay, we're finding it. We're finding it now. And
as you say, it's a lifelong endeavor.
Yeah, it is.
Chipping away.
Yeah, exactly.
Developing.
Yeah, totally. It is. Oh yeah, we're chipping away, and there's a lot to chip at. Definitely.
Yeah, for anyone who's wondering, so Cameron Warren of Grin, the singer-guitarist in that group, yeah, I've my only criticism as I was listening to your music, which is not a problem in the world of prog, I've noticed, is that like there hasn't been every song you've written is beautiful. It is atmospheric. It is emotive. It takes you on a journey, and as a musician, there's so much to delight the ear. The only thing I remember, I was thinking, like, I'm just kind of missing. There's not necessarily like a hookiness in some choruses, and then the collapse comes along. Like it's like you heard me. Like there's hookiness in that. Waiting Gold has got a catchy chorus. I'm like, there's other elements you can explore in those. I'm not saying all choruses need to be catchy, but I was just like, that's interesting that there isn't. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a very good point. And I think that, again, that kind of speaks to us finding and feeling confident in our songwriting. And it not having to, it doesn't have to be too thoughtful. You know what I mean? Like, we are huge fans of complex music. But sometimes that's not very easy listening. And sometimes you want to just like put something on in the background that makes you feel like, you know, that you don't have feet of clay. You know what I mean? Like that you're just fine and things are fine. And we are, all of us, huge pop music fans. So it just made sense. Waiting Gold and The Collapse were old songs that Matt and I had written at university. Yeah.
At university? Wow.
Yeah, we wrote those quite a while ago, but they were intended. We had the idea that we were going to go on to be just sort of like a songwriting duo, but kind of ghost writing.
Okay.
And that we might get into that. So that was the intention behind writing those. They were never meant for Exploring Birdsong at the time. Gosh. But it didn't really make a lot of sense to just keep them and not do anything with them, because obviously we didn't, or at least haven't up until now, we haven't gone into dishing other songs out to other people. We just haven't. So we've got an entire list of songs that are just kind of sitting around.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it made sense to develop them and turn them into Exploring Birdsong, and that didn't take very much work at all, actually.
I'll bet. Yeah, because as much as they've got a kind of pop chorus sentiment to them, it sounds very much like Exploring Birdsong. It doesn't sound in any way like it's a departure. It's just like it's another expression within it.
Yeah, right. It's just a different avenue. I mean, I kind of, oh my gosh, I've got to steady here because I'm not trying to make a comparison between us and Genesis. That's too much. But if you are a Genesis fan, you have the opportunity to like the early prog catalog and get your teeth into that. But you've also got the perfect chance to find amazing pop music.
I was gonna make the same point here because you
Yeah.
said you aligned on liking Genesis together. Like I remember loving "I Can't Dance." It was one of my favorite songs when I was a kid. I
Yeah.
was like, this is amazing. It's that
Yeah.
pop rock song. It's simple but effective and punchy.
Yeah.
But then I remember going, well, let me listen to other songs by Genesis. I was like, oh, I'm not. This is completely different.
Oh
What the hell?
yeah. Yeah. You get into the Colony of Slippermen, you're like, well, hold on.
Some
Hold
weird
on.
shit, man.
Yeah. But I think it's just a great chance to find so much different music in one place. It's all under the Genesis umbrella, and there's so many flavors and so much great stuff that you can get your teeth into. So, you've people that are like, oh, I don't like Genesis. It's like, okay, that's fine, but
What songs have you heard?
yeah, like if you're telling me that you aren't really into like anything off of Foxtrot or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, have you listened to Duke? Because you might find something, there's so much surface area of music that they covered. There's just so much. But yeah, so I really like that, and the opportunity that Exploring Birdsong gives all three of us. I love the opportunity that we can have to just be like, okay, well, I want to write this. So we haven't really locked ourselves into anything particularly. I think people that enjoy our music are kind of up for anything, really. So anything that we can make work, at least up until a certain point.
Well, even then, like do what is driving you creatively that you find fulfillment in. And Genesis has been doing some wide scale expressions in the past, but there's never been a better time, I think, than now, because people are less concerned with, well, I want to stay in this lane of this one genre.
Yeah.
It's become much more accepted to blend with other bits and pieces in the modern era. So
yeah, oh my gosh. I mean, I was heavy into Sabrina Carpenter's album. I still am, and I
know
think
that
it's
name.
Yeah, oh my gosh, get involved. She's just so, oh wow, I just love her. So,
Is it a pop singer? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, oh yeah, she's like the it girl pop star right now.
Okay,
and
I'm showing my age now. I don't know who the it pop star.
She's great. She's great.
Okay.
But it's all very kind of, I like her so much, not to get on my Sabrina Carpenter soapbox, but I like her so much because she's quite self-aware, and she makes lots of silly jokes, and it's not that serious, and she's just kind of running around doing pop music and being a beautiful woman, and she knows that that's what she's doing. But there's also quite a lot in her songwriting that, she is an artist. So, there's plenty of great stuff to find. She's just really got it down to a T. She's got pop music down.
I'm making a note. Sabrina.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's just good, silly fun.
As we were chatting there, I was thinking about one of my absolute favorite artists in the world right now, Bill Murray. There's a similar thing there, which is like, he is doing his own thing.
Yeah.
He's letting his personality fly whatever way he wants to express it, and it's fucking gold. And the music is unreal.
Yeah, I love Bill Murray also. And seeing them live was just such a joy. So yeah, I'm with you there, really firmly with you there.
Yeah, no, they're perfecting something. I don't know what it is, but it is, they're perfecting it entirely.
Oh yeah.
I want to chat some more about vocal bits and pieces, because you consistently in your songs will hit notes at the end of melodies and sustain them, but you won't just sustain that one note. You will flirt around with the notes next to doing kind of runs. I guess that's coming from the land of Leona Lewis. But how, especially, there was in one of the songs in Stitch, I think it was, there's a lyric when you're saying like, come see, and there was just a billion notes, high range, very quickly. How do you learn to do that? Because I'd imagine you'd have to, do you either figure out what the notes are you want to hit, slow it down and practice going between them so you can do it quickly? Or are you just at this stage so versed in singing, you're kind of improvising it as you record?
It's largely improvisational.
Jesus Christ. That's kind of annoyingly impressive.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Especially the annoying part. I love it.
Just because I can't do that. Again, the school of Billy Joe Armstrong did not teach you how to do that.
Yeah, listen, I've been there. But yeah, you're completely right. It all comes from being young and listening to what was around at that time, and most of the pop music was kind of girl singers doing R&B vocals. And I was very much there. So Beyonce, Mariah Carey, it's all there. And then from sort of going to university and being serious about studying other people, other very other technicians, really, because that's what they are. You know, if you look at gospel music and the vocals that are happening there, they're very skilled technicians. It's insane. And what I try to apply to vocals is like, it's a difficult thing, actually, because if you introspect on it too much, you can hit some uncomfortable areas. But I want to keep impressing myself and being proud of myself.
Right.
So if I'm aware of my skill set, almost sort of like it's here. So I know that I do certain things. We're getting vulnerable now, but I do certain things because I am trying to counter something else. So I know that I can sing these runs, and I do that if I feel as though like, oh, my tone isn't right there, and I don't like that. So I fall back on this other thing that I've spent years copying other people, because that's where it comes from. I can't really remember learning how to do it. I would just copy other people's when I'm practicing or whatever. And then you kind of working out any muscle, you just sort of develop the muscle. I'm not a teacher, guys. Don't come to me for lessons. I really don't. I can't. But yeah, I don't know. It just became something that I was like, oh, I can do this for some reason. I don't know. But I think I can apply it to this, because there's so much kind of in Exploring Birdsong where like I don't, it doesn't not fit. You know, it's not that it's like, oh, I wouldn't do that. The music doesn't need that. You can decide whether you believe that about anything. But
there can be opinions, yeah, sure.
Yeah, right. But
it's no different from if a bass line is doing a lick at the end of it. Like, why not do that with the vocals? If you have that in your arsenal, you know, if it feels right, throw it in.
Yeah, and I think it's something that in heavier music, certainly, I think there's space. I think there's an area for, you know, you can get any vocalist involved with that, and they'll add their expertise and their flavors, and you found something new.
100%.
You know, so like there's really no kind of I don't think a lot can go wrong with that, really. Maybe it can.
Sure. No, but I'm hoping to see more of that. I heard there's a band called Gore who were new on the scene, and their last song of their EP at the end, she goes on just flying through runs. I'm like, more of this in metal. Like, why the hell not?
Yeah.
Very cool. But so that's one thing when you're doing kind of lead vocals, where you're essentially, it's like a solo instrument at that point. But the work you do with Espera, you have 3 vocalists, it's multi-part harmonies. And what I'm getting from yourself is that you're kind of learning as you go. How are you structuring backing vocal harmonies together? Is that from a place of, well, I know we could do a 5th and a 7th over here, that's going to sound like a nice chord? Or are you in a room going, well, what if I try a bit higher? Oh, that sounds nice. Or how do you write those with the group?
Well, I'm very, very fortunate with Matty and Paige that actually, funnily, Paige and I go way back. So we would kind of encounter each other at the kind of events that I was referring to earlier, so that we knew, but we weren't friends at that time. I don't really know why.
Were you competition at that point? Or?
I mean, maybe, but we were both kind of just like, well, we're here and it's probably not that deep, you know? So, but for some strange reason, we just never really connected at that point, probably because we were just scared to be there. But so when we ended up at Lipper together with with Matilda, and I already knew that Paige. I knew that she had the goods. I knew she was an exceptional vocalist. And then we had this class where we would all have to get up and sing for one another. It sounds so traumatizing, and actually it kind of was.
But if you're going to Lipa, like, you have to expect you're going to need to perform a few times.
Exactly. And certainly for Paige and I think Matty had sort of, again, kind of explored the waters a tiny little bit, but I knew certainly for Paige and I that because we've been performing since we were children, really, that we kind of had not an advantage as such, but we understood about performing and whatever, and it didn't, it could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot more traumatizing, let's say that. But yeah, that class was great for just kind of getting everyone used to doing what you're there to do. I agree with you. It kind of sounds like, well, isn't that the whole point? But there's definitely a foundational element to studying at Lipa where it's like, okay, well, we're starting here, but everyone's going to end up here. So, we've got to get everyone there. So yeah, I remember it as well. I remember the one class where like Matilda was stood up singing for everyone, and I was like, I can't believe, like, she's so unassuming with it though. Like she's such a warm, inviting person, but she never like is desperate to tell you how amazing she is. She's just not. So
it's a good quality to have.
Yeah, both of them are just exceptional people. But I would say that because they're my closest friends. So, but they are truly. So getting to work with them, and they're both talented in vocal arrangement themselves. So I understand that even though, like, in the context of Espera, it's largely certainly for the big work that we do, it's my arrangements that I'm putting to them. So I know that they understand already what's going to sound good, and I know that there's always the opportunity for them to say, oh, well, what about this, or what about this, and then that works better, and then that's what we do. So yeah, I'm very lucky with them, because I think that they view vocals the same way I do, which is that you can get to a point where you're listening and experiencing vocalists that are incredibly technical, and they have mastered their anatomy. That's the difference between someone who plays vocals and any other exceptionally talented instrumental musician. I think if you have mastered your anatomy, that you're doing something right. So yeah, I do think that they view things largely the same way I do. In terms of arrangement, though, it's very off the cuff. I get the material in advance, and this same principle applies to Exploring Birdsong. I just do what I think sounds right. There isn't very much kind of, there's not too much considering whether it's correct, put it that way. So like, I won't be mithering over, oh, but then they move to this chord and then we need to do, it's kind of not that. It just feels correct sometimes. And then we kind of go from there. But I think what the three of us, and a strength of ours, is that we are familiar with the process. All of us have experience arranging harmony, and you'll know what it means. But I think my influences with that I hear most of all is the Beach Boys.
Oh, nice.
So like, that's a great reference point when you're listening to vocals that are just everywhere but make sense. Everything fits together. It's just a great kind of pool of reference to pull from, and I think that's probably the biggest influence. But yeah, I'm very lucky with those two, because they trust me, and I trust them. I know that I could give and do sometimes, I give them quite complex things to do, and lots to think about. But I know that they can do it, so I never worry about them. I'm never thinking that I'm asking too much, or that like, oh, I don't think, oh, I don't, maybe I should do that bit, because it's just, there's none of that. Everyone is more than capable, exceptional, those two. So yeah, nothing, no worries there. I just hope that we can continue on with it for as long as possible, really.
That sounds healthy and the right kind of mindset. I would imagine if you're approaching something that is backing vocals, it's not like each one of us has to shine. It's like the point of it is to support the piece that you're in.
Yeah.
And I remember I loved the hell out of the song All For You by Grin. And when it first comes in and just, oh, there's a backing vocals in there, it was just a layer underneath. It wasn't like, oh, look at this amazing chord of harmony. It's just like it was almost a tone that it added. It was just like, oh shit. That I find to be a sophisticated approach, being like, well, how do we support the mood first? And that is about, as we were saying before, if you see like a block of voice, you're like, I can see the thing in there. How do I get the voices to support that thing that I'm imagining? Ah, there it is. We're good.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I loved about, so I worked with Cameron on the BVs for Grin, but I have to say, by the time that I kind of got there and was knocking about with him and we were trying to sort it out, he had largely arranged those parts. So it was kind of just me suggesting things and saying, oh, what if we did da-da-da? And he is also an exceptional vocal arranger. So I think that's the only instance actually where like I have been in a collaborative sort of arrangement process with the artist. Usually what we do is as I was saying earlier, we receive the material and then I get my teeth into it, and then that's what the part is. So there's I find it very comforting that there is this kind of amount of trust in us to understand the material well enough that we can come to it and add something of value to it without anybody really needing to supervise that process. I feel fortunate that we're at least at the point now where that we do have something of value to offer to people, and that I what I want most of all is to feel that my work is respected by my peers. That's a huge part of it. I don't necessarily, that's not necessarily the same as wishing that everybody would like it. It's just that if there is, an understanding and a respect for that process, that's what I'm after, really, and people understanding that there is kind of there's an element of skill to it and practice to it to get to a point where you can slot it into something where it doesn't already exist. So that's what I don't know how we got there. Oh my goodness.
No, it's a good, deep, life affirming thing to realize and be aware of, because I think you're dead right. And that's how I approach most of the stuff when I'm reviewing music. I have a similar mindset when kind of breaking it down of sorts, is that I might not necessarily like something, but I can appreciate if it's high quality. Like, and that's, because music is ultimately subjective.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can appreciate the technical prowess that has gone into creating something, even if it's like, well, it's not for me, but like, fair enough.
Yeah,
that's impressive. And that certainly, if you are going to be a professional performer, you need to get to that level. You're like, well, what I'm doing is of high quality. It is worth, everything. So that's a great place to be. Do you having... You got the backing vocals group, you've got the Exploring Birdsong and the rest. Is this your ideal scenario to have lots of projects and things you're working on and expressions? Or do you have an end goal in mind? Like, I would love to do more of, lead work, or do you like the variety you have? Is this kind of ideal pocket?
I do really enjoy the variety. I'm very glad and fortunate to have a project where I can inject creativity in the sense of like creating something that's my expression and my whatever I feel that I need to get out, I can write about that, and it can be my lyrics, and it can be my music, and it can be my entirely kind of authentic kind of conversation with other people, I guess. But with doing backing vocals, oh gosh, I have to be honest, like the responsibility that you have as the artist and you know, to make everything work and to make a band viable, it is nice to have a break from that sometimes and for it to just be about making something. So when that's the kind of attitude I have towards the backing vocal stuff, is that I really love that I can, there is expression to it certainly, but you know, you are interpreting someone else's expression and you are making it into what you can add to it. And I like that part of it because it's almost like, oh well, oh gosh, I'm a bit I hate to say it the way it's going to come out, but you know, the hard bit's already done, right? Like the song's already great. Like this is already great. Yeah. So like, you know, I haven't had to worry about how it's got to the finished point because I'm like, well, it's not finished because we still have something to add to it that I think can elevate that. So yeah, I do like the opportunity of having both, and it's very nice with backing vocals to not have to stress too much about the song.
It's a different responsibility.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And it's quite nice to have the variety of different kinds of responsibility because it's a different game when you have a blank canvas. Like, I need to create something from nowhere. It's a different ask than to go, okay, I've got this, I can refine it. Like it's easier, I think, to edit something I've written than to write it in the first place. Even though the edit's going to make it the thing that is at the end. Somehow I can sink my teeth into that with less friction, perhaps.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Then I wonder about when it comes to live performances of backing vocals, something I've never done. I mean, I was in bands where I'd play drums and do backing vocals or play guitar and do backing vocals. But if that is the one thing, do you have a different experience pre-show when it comes to like the responsibility of being the lead in Exploring Birdsong? Does it feel different before you get on stage than when you're going, I'm doing the backing vocals? Or are they kind of incomparable?
Well, in a way, yes. But I feel intense responsibility before a Birdsong show. I'm like, oh my gosh, especially because I'm the only vocalist on stage, certainly of late.
Of course.
So, you know, I enjoy it only because we've managed to cultivate a group of people in a community that love our music so much. And obviously that's our chance to get together with them and for everybody to enjoy the music. So I love that aspect of it, but I would be lying if I said that I was never nervous. Oh my gosh. Matt and Johnny can attest to, you know, I've had conversations with them, again, to be completely candid. I've had conversations with them where I've said like, I almost feel guilty because I'm so in here before shows and, you know, aware of my perceived responsibility that I feel like I'm bringing down the vibes, man. Like it's just not like, and then of course they're obviously saying, no, don't worry, like we get it and it's fine. But that's something that I don't have to be aware of and don't encounter. I'm not confronted with that when I'm doing backing vocals. Mostly because it is such a comfort to not be the person that everybody's looking to, you know. Like it is a comforting feeling when it's like, okay, well, I know that my job is to literally be in the background. Right? So, you know, it is very rare that I find those scenarios nerve-wracking. And I think, you know, for the girls, for Paige and Matty, because we have always done it together for as long as our professional career goes, it's always been together. So, you know, we're always aware of whether one's feeling a bit anxious about something or if we know that we've always got each other. And I do feel the same with Matt and Johnny. I do know that I can look around and make eye contact with them. Usually I'll get a wink and I'll get a, something, oh, just something nice. And then it's all fine again. But there is, I think, I can't wait for when Exploring Birdsong can have Paige and Matilda back on stage with us, because that has happened. And that used to be our core lineup. I can't wait until they're back, because it is very comforting when there are other vocalists on stage, and and I'm so familiar with them, so of course it would be great. But yeah, it is. I do feel there is a big difference, but I love the music that we're making, and I love Matt and Johnny, and I love getting to give it to people. So
yeah, it's tricky. Like if you want to express the thing and you want to do it live, someone's got to sing this.
Right.
It's got to be you. You got to figure
it
out.
I'm the singer, so
find a way. Yeah, but yeah, I can see as well. Like if you're doing backing vocals, because the responsibility, if you are the lead singer, if you have a cold and you're on a tour, it's like, oh man. But if you have other voices, they can kind of help, and you're like, okay, we can balance it a little bit differently tonight because I've got a little bit of sore throat, whatever it is. That's a big comfort. And the thing of the familiar spot between some folks. It's like my version of, if I'm nervous for a gig when I was playing gigs, but then I got behind the drum kit, I'm like, I'm home. I know what to do here. This is fun. No matter what the other environment is, I'm in my safe space. We're good.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, it's exceptionally rare, I have to say, to contradict myself almost directly from what I just said. It is very rare that I go to Birdsong shows and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous about whether I can perform this properly. It's never that. It's just that when you are the artist, there's so much else that goes into a show, and that you're on in-ears, and there's so much tech going on there that can go absolutely wrong, and you know that you've got tracks, and you know that things need triggering at a certain point that can go wrong, and it's all this extra noise that gets into your head. And then you think, especially because like I'm singing at the same time as all of these things can go wrong in your ears. Like, oh god,
I've never had to experience that. The chatter. No, I've never had that.
So like it's that's the only, it's all ifs, buts and maybes. It's never a situation where I'm thinking like, I can't sing and I don't know what to do. So that's lucky, but I think again that's an advantage of it almost. You hear people say sometimes like, oh, I remember when I like woke up, like when I became like a lucid adult, and I feel that I was singing before I had that moment. Do you know what I mean? So it's been going on for so long now that I feel comfortable with singing. It's just adding all of these extra other elements that could potentially make singing very difficult. That's what makes me nervous.
Makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
I've had an absolute ball chatting to you. I could happily talk to you for another hour and plus.
Likewise.
But, no, it's been a joy. I suppose before we go here, what is it you've mentioned in albums? There's an album in the works. What can we look forward to in the world of Exploring Birdsong coming up, if you can tease anything?
Okay. Ooh.
If you can't, I don't want you to get in trouble.
Oh no, I'll try and play it safe.
All right.
I am exceptionally excited about what we are making, and I can't wait for it to be out. With the best will in the world, it will be out this year.
Okay, we got time. We got 12 months.
We got time. All being well. But yeah, I can't say too much more because yeah.
Great.
But I'm very excited, and I think people that hear it will be pleased.
Wonderful.
So.
An excellent tease. Thank you very much for that. And thank you again for your time. I've loved chatting nerdy music bits and pieces and finding out more about the details, the thought process behind the writing you do in Exploring Birdsong and the rest. So thank you very much, and good luck with whatever's coming out, hopefully this year.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. Well, I hope you also enjoyed that wonderful conversation with Lynsey Ward. I'll be sure to put some links in the description to Exploring Birdsong and Espera so you can keep up to date with those projects in future. Thank you for tuning into this. If you enjoyed this, do make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you're watching this on YouTube, or a podcast if you're checking this out on other platforms. There's a Discord server as well. You can come chat to me about music. That link will be in the description too. Hopefully you've enjoyed this enough that you'll come back for another interview on this podcast very soon.